Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Carl Goulet, and I am the gallery director here at 5 Points. I'll try not to be too long tonight, but I just want to bring a few things to your attention. These exhibitions will be up through June 3rd. All 5 Points gallery exhibitions are free and open to the public. The gallery is open Tuesday through Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m., and by appointment. Speaking of June 3rd, if you're in the area, we ask that you please check out the 5 Points Arts Print Festival featuring Big Ink at the 5 Points Arts Center. You can shop the vendors, bid on our silent auction, view a national print juried exhibition, join print demonstrations, lectures, and more. All of this is free and open to the public, and that is June 3rd and 4th, 10 to 4 both days. For more information on the current shows and our events, please visit our website, and that is 5pointsarts.org. Tonight's talk will be recorded and available to view at a later date. If anyone has any questions throughout tonight's conversation, you're welcome to type them into the chat and our Q&A boxes, which are located just at the bottom of your screens. Though not joining us tonight, also on exhibit is work by the late Margaret Grimes, which is featured in our East Gallery. Her beautifully rendered forest paintings were captured from her Maine and Connecticut-based studios. This exhibition is presented by her family, and a special thanks to Margaret's daughter, Carolyn Wallace, for bringing the show to our space. Featured on tonight's panel, we welcome the Water Women. We have Susan Hoffman Fishman, Leslie Sobel, and Krisanne Baker, who've created a large paper and video-based installation titled Flood 2.0 in our West Gallery, which warns of a future apocalyptic flood and is presented to raise awareness of environmental concerns, specifically involving water. Also joining our panel tonight, we welcome Meredith Miller and MJ Millington, who've collaborated on a project called Dreaming Animals, which combines photography and poetry in an effort to raise awareness of declining animal biodiversity. Moderating tonight's talk is Power Booth. Power has exhibited his paintings for over 4 decades. His work is represented in numerous private collections and public collections, including the Met, Guggenheim, Whitney, and I could go on. He is currently a professor of painting at the Hartford Art School. Power is a former 5 Points Arts board member and great friend of 5 Points. And also be on the lookout. Power's work is coming to 5 Points Gallery this fall. I'll hand things over to Power and we can get started. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody and all those who are tuning in. This is quite a remarkable exhibition, taking on some very difficult issues. And I just want to start with Krisanne and Susan and Leslie, and maybe you can discuss how your group came together, the Water Women Arts collaboration. Where did it begin?
Shall I give a history? About 2 years ago, I was speaking with another Water Woman artist who unfortunately is no longer with our group, but about creating an installation that linked the story of Noah and the first apocalyptic flood with what is happening now. And she and I spoke for probably 6 months about the project. We knew we wanted to do projections and we wanted to do a multi-dimensional project. And at the same time, I was in conversation with Judy McElhone, who's the director of 5 Points, about the possibility of developing the center's first artist residency. So eventually that was approved, and I was given the okay to go ahead and invite 3 other artists to join me in this venture. I chose the 2 artists who are here today, and a third who lives in Canada and ended up having to discontinue her association because of personal reasons, and also distance. And during that wonderful week last June, we worked intensely to create a prototype of the installation that's in the gallery right now. We worked primarily through Zoom, and the only time we were together to actually function as a working group was at the residency, and in the installation of the exhibition itself. And we do have a scheduled second residency in October at the swimming hole residency in New York State to develop Flood 2.0 further.
Great. It's an interesting point of view because we experience your collaboration, it seems, from the water. Our perspective is within the flood. And that
Yes.
seems to be a really, like, we're already drowning. We're sleepwalking under the sea, looking up at the bottom of the boat. Not
Exactly.
a perspective I normally think of the flood. Somehow, the deluge certainly was a subject of especially artists around the turn of the 17th, 18th to 19th century. Turner and Blake. There's a fascination with these, and Jonathan Martin, with these apocalyptic experiences and the sublime. Does this are these works that you connect with, or am I?
Yes, I mean, Susan and I have in particular talked a great deal about the fact that so many of the disasters that are befalling us are also very beautiful. She and I did a residency with Planet Labs, which is a remote sensing company, and we were very struck looking from a very, very high point of view down at floods and other disasters and how beautiful they are. And so there is that element of the sublime, and also of just the incredible power of nature. So part of why we wanted to take this perspective of being under the water is just to bring home that idea of how powerful nature is and how much we are surrounded by it. We don't master it.
And I think in viewing a flood from up above the water line is disturbing enough, but I think that no individual can really say that they can't, that their mind must go to, oh, what if I was drawn under? Every time I've seen images of tsunamis or flooded places, I just imagine myself being pulled under. And so that was part of my impetus for us wanting for the installation to be viewed from underwater instead of up above the surface, to look at it in a different way.
I should also say that the people who came to the opening reception got it immediately. I mean, they came over to us and said, we feel like we're underwater. And that was definitely our intent.
Yeah, it was when I experienced it, I felt that you were immediately cutting off the idea that I could view this from some distance. In other words, I'm implicated, I'm in it, and my and then the fact that I can walk in and experience it, I just felt like, well, it's really kind of a dream space, isn't it? And then it takes you to mythical figures like the Mesopotamian god who basically lived underwater. I just felt like, it touches a lot of interesting mythical possibilities that have been in our culture from the beginning.
Definitely. And, the intention when I first conceived of it was as a myth, using one myth to create another.
Max Ernst talked about the future prehistoric. Curious way of putting these two words together. So that in some ways you're talking about the future, and you're using the language of the deluge.
Yeah, and there's a thing about the power of myth and these stories that are really in our blood. Everybody grows up with some of them. And I think that when you take the power of that and harness it to looking at a current situation, you give people another way into thinking about where we are now and what's hopefully powerful and resonant.
Well, I also feel like and correct me if I'm off track here, but I feel in some sense when we're underwater, but awake and not panicked, we are somehow engaged with the unconscious. It's kind of a dream space. So I feel like there's something very Jungian about it being, this perspective of being, we're entangled in this overwhelming situation we would normally want to panic about, but given that it's given to us in this dream form, we're able to think about it, we are overwhelmed with what we see as a future that is not at all the past that we've come through. We're changing the planet, and it's not clear. Of course, everything's always changing, but we're changing it very rapidly. So, what our future potential is it's just not written, and it's not clear that we're going to survive it.
Well, getting back to the idea of myth, part of the installation, we have 45 scrolls up here, but also we have 3 videos, as well as we have a makeshift boat, a sail, a mast that is falling apart, basically. And we also have a Greek chorus. And the Greek chorus tells its own story. It tells the story of this installation. And it tells it in a very repetitive, sing-song way. We were warned decades and decades ago. And it's repeated in the video, and it's repeated in the actual text on the wall. We performed it on opening night, and I like to think that we created a new myth.
I think it's important too that the collective human psyche is quietly panicked about climate change, mostly. And the people like us that are out there are trying to bring some attention or some awareness to it. We're not trying to further panic people, but we are trying to get people to look at it in a different way, so that they might become engaged. And I think that was one of our driving forces for connecting with the myth, but then presenting it in a different way than any of us have ever experienced, by looking at the old myths compared to what we would potentially experience if this were us in this situation coming up.
Terrific. Tell me a little bit more about the chorus. I don't think I was aware of that. I saw it during the day, so I didn't see it at night.
Well,
Is there are you going to play something, Carl?
perhaps, Carl, you could play the video?
Yes. There is no sound, so you guys can keep talking.
Well, I can read the text to you, if you feel that would be helpful.
Is it a long text? How long is it? Or is it repetitive?
I can just read a little bit of it. How about that?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So again, we have a chorus that is repeated over and over again, and it starts with the text the text is, I am called Noah, Noa, meaning action. My flood is the second one. The first one is well known. That time, evil, greed, and immorality were punished by an angry God. This time, evil, greed, and immorality are being punished by the earth itself. And here is the chorus. We were warned decades and decades ago. There was inaction everywhere. I saw it coming. I built a boat. I painted it red for my own anger, for courage, for life, for the blood of millions who perished. I give it my name, Noah, meaning action. My mythical ancestor saw what I have seen, evil, greed, and immorality. That time the water was meant to cleanse the world, to start again. This time the water will be an end to us. We were warned decades and decades ago. There was inaction everywhere. I saw it coming. I built a boat. I painted it red for my own anger, for courage, for life, for the blood of millions who perished. I gave it my name, Noah, meaning action. I'll stop there, but you get a sense of the kind of chanting of the.
Yes, and I remember reading that. Yes. Well, as a remarkable social species, we not only invented language and mythical stories to enhance our understanding of who we are and what it means to be human. Somehow we inevitably became so successful that one could say we've become an evasive species. We've had a tremendous impact on the environment without quite knowing what we're doing. So maybe with this as a bridge to the collaboration between Meredith and MJ Millington, because I think the changes being so rapid mean that many animals are unable to, are going extinct, and we're going through a period of losing, and we don't get those back. So maybe Meredith or MJ, which one do you would like to talk about your collaboration?
Meredith can start. He was the inception point.
Sure. So this was work that we started during the pandemic. However, prior to the pandemic, in my role as a photographer at Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, I thought about doing a project about disappearing animals with our collection material. So I'd often, come across animals drawn, in an old book, and I'd turn the page and it would be blank on the other side, but you could see, the outline of the animal. So I was already thinking about ghost animals. And then with the pandemic lockdown, we were all sent home, and it sort of presented an opportunity for a self-imposed artist residency. And, I began printing out material related to endangered animals from the Beinecke's digital library, and then reconfiguring them into still lifes at my home with related items. And MJ, I reached out to her very early on in the project because I was intending to apply for a broadside competition, which I didn't realize until the day that, it was due that required text. So I asked MJ if she could write a poem in like 6 hours to go with a particular image. And of course, she pulled through. So this,
I have to say.
Yes. So this image that you're seeing is our artist portraits that we use with the project. But the next slide sort of shows what the first sort of attempt at our collaboration looked like, where we incorporated the poem into the image. And I'll let MJ read this one.
Right. Worth. A bird in the hand in the bush, an egg in the bird, a bird in the egg. An egg in the nest, a nest in the bush, a hand in the nest, an egg in the hand.
So part of what I was doing when I was putting together the images at home, because of the lockdown, I was only using material that was within my own home. And sort of the idea that we all have stuff that's, references animals became a theme in our project. And I think MJ can speak very eloquently about that.
Well, Meredith early on talked about the idea of playing with images of animals. And of course, we have a lot of stuff about animals in our language too, like cliches and metaphors and things that we don't even realize anymore that we're saying, or that we're talking about real animals that may or may not even be with us anymore. So I thought for my part, I could concentrate on playing with words and stories about animals for the poems.
So in the next slide, our collaboration was picked for the broadside competition, and it was, part of a portfolio for donors at the Vermont Studio Center. And Carl, you can go to the next slide too. So that was sort of the early iteration. Then I went on, at least for the images, to sort of take out the color that was in the original digital image file and then put it back in manually with markers and pens, which was something I had never done before. So that became another sort of component of the images. And you can go to the next one, Carl. So this one about elephants was one of the first images I put together. So again, the core of it is Beinecke collection material, which I've reprinted in large, ripped up, and staged with items in my home, these IKEA elephant trays and Trader Joe's peanut butter and this cute little elephant clip from my 10th grade birthday party, and that I somehow still had. And, you know, some of it was intuitive. I stuck the clip on my finger, but there's all sorts of references to that. Elephants never forget. You know, you often tie a string on your finger, and the poem that accompanies this image is really beautiful.
Well, I'll say a word about our process here first. I didn't interrogate Meredith about what any of these images meant to her before I wrote the poems that accompany them. So the image came first, and then I would just try to think about, analyze, explore what seems to be going on in the image and what I could say about it. And so this one, of course, when you're working with cliches, elephants never forget is the one that comes up most frequently. And so I started to think about what it would mean to be an elephant in our world and to never be able to forget what has been done to you. So the poem that accompanies this image is called Never Forget. What is remembering made of? Sun and pain, water and dust, an eye for an eye, a tusk for a tusk.
Yeah, so I think the next image, Carl, you know, this is one of my favorites, and I often think of it as sort of like the signature one along with its poem. So I wanted to make an image about rhinos. You know, MJ mentioned the idea of playing games. So during the pandemic, I'd often walk our dog, you know, around the high school to like connect to the park. And the high school has a daycare, and the daycare has, you know, some equipment for little kids, playground equipment. And on this one particular thing, there's outlines of animals, including a rhino, a camel, an elephant. And so I was thinking about how, you know, we're all raised with these animals, knowing to recognize them, yet, you know, fewer and fewer of us will have like the lived experience, yet we still have items in our home. Although for the rhino, I really couldn't come up with much, but so hence the dictionary and a pepper grinder. And, you know, I just reused this butterfly from a previous image. And I happened to be doing yoga one day in camo yoga pants and thought that, you know, started thinking about the rhino photo and about poaching and a very, you know, moving documentary I had seen about the last white rhino.
Yes, and I watched the same documentary about the last two female northern white rhinos who will never reproduce now because there's only two and they're both female. And it was thinking about what direction to go in with the rhino that brought me some understanding about the sort of greater scope of this project for myself, because there's so much doom and gloom involved with endangered species. And it's tempting to try to work from that, but I don't think that that's a sustainable solution for trying to get people to care enough to do something about, in this case, endangered animals in their life. It seemed like a better thing would be to try to forge a connection that they would keep in the forefront of their mind, like their love of an animal or something like that. So this one, this poem for me involved my childhood love of the Peabody Museum at Yale, and a particular fossil they have there, which is of an extinct North American rhinoceros. So this poem is called Let Sleeping Bones Lie. Here at the Museum of Sleeping Bones, in a silent drawer down a darkened row, a stone jawbone older than knowable time. Teleoceras, our last rhinoceros. 10 million years ago, this jawbone roamed Nebraska, warm savanna and watering holes, till a volcano's drifting ash laid it to rest. One jawbone to speak of a species gone. Here at the museum, the unburied bones in silent drawers down darkened rows lie dreaming of what is lost.
So we included a few others in this, short PowerPoint, some of which aren't in the exhibition. This is about all sea creatures. And I did make a few images about animals that aren't endangered, like the rabbit, although I'm sure there's some, species somewhere of rabbit that is. It's about grizzly bears. The buffalo image was one that I had a lot of fun thinking about childhood games with, including the game pieces and just all the iterations of buffalo here, buffalo soldiers, Buffalo Bill, the city of Buffalo, Buffalo Plaid, and so on. Oh, and this image I made at my parents' home in Vermont, and MJ has a great poem about this one as well.
Well, I was struck by the number of moose mugs that Meredith's family has, and our family has a moose mug too. And I thought to myself, why do people fetishize animals and put them on things and not really care about the animals themselves? So this poem is about that. It's called The Idea of a Moose. Maybe the idea of a moose is more seemly than the gangle-legged, novel-nosed moose itself, suitable for coffee mugs and bumper stickers, and proof we thought about touching wildness once and got the t-shirt.
And then Carly can just go through the rest, and this is Be Safe or Be Sorry. Butterfly Effect. This is called Harpoon. So each of the images is actually named after a children's game. This one is called Camel Up. And Go-Go Giraffe.
That's the end, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the earliest art pieces of, I think, found in the Sumerian area was the lion man, a hybrid between a lion and a human being. So it seems as we became human and became more self-conscious, and we were able to use clothes to actually live in different niches that we couldn't survive in otherwise. We've always had this relationship to animals. On the one hand, they were a source of food, and the other hand, they were creatures, live creatures that we lived with. We had to make peace with that, and it's fascinating to think. And maybe maybe unnerving to think that we continue this relationship with animals, but now it's on a coffee cup. It's not, but it's certainly, we look at the cave paintings that go back 30,000 years ago, and we have no real knowledge of what they stood for, but we're in awe of how extraordinarily powerful and beautiful they are. And it's fascinating that there are really no images of people. They're just images of the animals. The animals were the context we lived in. And we keep that up, even though it now is on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, maybe I shouldn't have been so cynical about the coffee cup, because, you know, you're drinking that coffee every day. You're keeping that animal with you every day, even though it's in this abortive form. But I don't think that we as a species could live without animals. They mean so much more to us than just, you know, other creatures who share the planet. There's so many images and metaphors in our language and in our art about, for example, like birds as souls, or metaphors like similes, like strong as an ox. You know, so much of the lives the animals lead is interwoven in ways that we don't notice anymore, or unless we really stop to think about it.
Well, we're animals. We are animals. So we just have a very elaborate language, and it distances ourselves from thinking that we are of the same, but we are animals. In Indonesia, the orangutan is referred to as another group of humans. You know, they're not referred to as a separate animal. So
but I think that one of the issues that we face as a culture, as a society, is that we are divorced from nature. We are divorced from animal life, and we may put them on our coffee cups, but it's one of the reasons why, you know, we are facing this crisis, is that we have not regarded the natural world as an equal partner. And we felt that, you know, we could do whatever we want to the natural world.
So, Susan, it's a very strange situation we're in, because we've created these technologies to replace animals. We used to have to, my father would get on his horse to go into school, you know, and those days just seem so far behind us. And we're now reaping the cost of what it means to have, as you say, separate ourselves from other living creatures. But boy, what's the solution? You know, I'm not going to ride a horse to work. You know, I'm going to get in my car, and I know every time I turn the key, I'm part of the problem.
Well, part of the solution is to re-engage with nature.
How do we do that in a real way?
Have respect for the animals that you eat. You have respect for the animal life that's around you, even if it's not exotic. You don't, you know, attack the squirrels like my mom does.
You have to pay attention and engage. Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about, in the Potawatomi language that she also grew up knowing, because she's both an indigenous member of the Potawatomi tribe and a botanist. And she talks about, in that language, living animals and plants are referred to as kin. And there is this connection that is really deep and linguistic about how they think about the world. And I think we need to embrace that idea and really focus more on engaging with the natural world, whether that's planting a native plant garden or to provide for pollinators, or which also helps with flooding and climate and all kinds of things. Our lack of connection to each other politically, I would argue, is related to our lack of connection to the natural world. We don't care enough for things that aren't just like us.
Also, the whole situation with water is very much related. I mean, we have felt that we have the right to dam rivers and, you know, to distort the paths of lakes and streams, and now they're finding that by undamming them and letting the rivers do what they do, it reduces flooding.
I think it goes beyond just a matter of respecting something, but giving it the same rights, a reverence, basically, to revere water or other animals or plants as having the same rights as humans. And that sort of thinking is just starting to come around into more of the populace, where, you know, a river in Ecuador was given the rights of a human, you know, a dozen years ago, and more places are also being given those rights. But here we are saying, okay, given the rights, and that means we hold on to the power of who gets to say who has the right, who has the power. But I think what intertwines between all of our works, even though they look very different, is that we're all concerned for the rights of these animals and their lives, as well as the rights of water.
Interesting. I had never heard that. So, Krisanne, tell me a little more. Ecuador gave the river the rights.
Right, about 10 to 12 years ago, Ecuador was the first country in the world that gave legal rights to a particular river, the same, affording it the same exact rights as a human being. And there, since that case, there have been more and more places in the world that have been legally seeking the rights for bodies of water, trees. It's been happening a lot with bodies of water, but certain areas, you know, it's happening more and more all over the planet in different locations, where people are seeking to protect particular areas by giving them the rights of a human, saying, no, you can't just dump chemicals into me and walk away, or dam something, or kill off all the wolves because they happen to be getting into the garbage, where, you know, urban suburban sprawl has happened.
So do any of you have questions for each other, or do we want to jump into questions from the audience?
Oh, there's an audience?
There is. And Carl, has anyone submitted a question from on chat?
I don't see anyone as of yet. If anyone has any questions, you can use the chat or the Q&A boxes and write them in.
I can follow up to the last point briefly. Things in my experience and in my town on coastal Connecticut has shown me that things that are protected they don't stay protected unless people are paying attention. There's always encroachment on that protection, and the hope that people aren't looking or they'll just ignore it because it doesn't directly affect them. I live on a tidal estuary, which is surrounded by salt marshes, which has been proven for decades to help curtail flooding, for example. And yet they are constantly under threat despite being protected by development for waterfront properties. And it's something that you always have to pay attention to. It's something that's happening in my town right now. A developer is trying to take over a piece of salt marsh that was supposed to be protected. So
we got to fight it.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a question that came in.
Actually a comment that chat is disabled. So Carl, I don't know if you can fix that. But that's amazing that Botswana apparently sets aside 40% of the country for conservation. I know there's been a general move that we should set aside 50% of land and more of ocean to preserve it. And that's going to be politically a neat trick.
Well, this decade, 2020 to 2030, is supposed to be the 30 by 30 decade where at least 30% was set aside, but it's not happening yet.
One of the moves that I've gotten very interested in is this idea of a homegrown national park. There's a writer named Doug Tallamy who writes about how in the US, the greatest amount of open land is in people's yards. And if we can make those spaces habitat friendly, make it native plants and native animals and stay out of the way, we give animals open paths to navigate and pollinators things to eat and to fertilize, and that all is a more accessible but very granular approach to protecting land. And you can look at
Susan's already got the bears in her backyard.
Right.
Yeah, we have a significant bear problem. And, you know, when there is no territory that they can call their own, they are encroaching upon, you know, I live in a sort of exurb suburb, and you know, the bears are daily visiting. And you know, there's a bill now before the legislature in Connecticut that would allow people to kill bears that are intruding. And you know, it's a dilemma. You know, it's they're not hurting anybody, but you know, you see these gigantic bears, people get afraid.
Right. So it's not really a problem, it's just people's fears.
Mm-hmm.
Although your neighbor across the street had one walk into his kitchen, so I would take notice. Yeah. But certainly where I am, we've killed off all the predators, and the deer are absolutely overrunning the city. I have deer in my yard pretty much daily, and they're beautiful. I love them, but the single biggest predator is cars, and that causes all kinds of problems.
And we now have moose.
In Connecticut? Whoa.
I haven't seen a moose. I've seen many bears, but not moose. Susan, where do you live?
Sort of. There have been something like 300 moose sightings in
Oh,
Connecticut.
really? Wow.
Bloomfield, wow.
Bloomfield. Ooh.
That's one town over from me. And so I think, you know, we are running up against a real life dilemma. You know, they have every right to live, and so do we, but we are more powerful.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks for
And
having
thank you
us.
for all of your wonderful work. I really enjoyed. It's a fabulous show. It's nice to settle into, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for moderating, and Carl, thank you for facilitating this.
Absolutely. All right.
So
So
if you haven't seen the show, you've run, don't walk to 5 Points Gallery.
it's open until June 3rd. We're open 6 days a week, 1 to 5. We're just closed on Mondays. All right, everyone have a good night.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.